the show. Probably my number one most requested video from you guys is how do you do a good double lateral stroke? And I've been kind of procrastinating, but I was like, you know what? I really just need to sit down and make this video because it's a pretty crucial technique to playing any modern marimba literature. So let's talk about it. All right, so what is a double lateral stroke? A double lateral stroke is when you either do a right-left or a left-right in quick succession, kind of like this. Now this is different from an alternating stroke because in an alternating stroke, you have one motion for each note. Okay, so each note gets its own muscular motion, like this. So a double lateral stroke, it's more like a diddle in that you want one motion and you want two notes to pop out. So like when you're playing a snare drum and you want a good diddle, you go down with your wrist and then you pick it up with your fingers and you get two notes. Da-da, da-da, da-da. But with a double lateral, it's kind of the same thing, except you want to move with your arm for the first note and then use your wrist to get the second note. Or much faster. So it's kind of like this circular motion with your hand that you do to get both of these notes to pop out. Now these strokes are used in two ways in modern literature. One is just to play notes, to play notes in a melody or in a pattern or an ostinato of some kind. And the other way is to give a different texture to a roll. So here's how it would be used to just play some regular notes. I'll play a little bit of Dr. Gratis from Debussy just to see how I can hit different notes by using these lateral strokes. So as you can see, that had many different kinds of strokes mixed together, but a lot of them were lateral strokes to get two notes that were right next to each other in one hand. Okay, the other way this is typically used is to provide a different kind of roll, like a different texture to a roll. Your normal roll, you do two double vertical strokes and it looks something like this. So you're just alternating left, right, left, right. But when you do a double lateral roll, it kind of gives it this like more filled out, kind of bumpy texture, which is really neat. And that's what this would sound like. So I'm going to provide you some tips with how to get started with this thing and how to get them really good and really fast. If you don't already have a really good alternating stroke though, don't proceed with watching this video. You want to get a nice good alternating stroke first because that'll give you the muscle groups prepared to do the double lateral stroke. Okay, the easiest way that I found to get started with these things is to do a literal flam with the mallets. So say you're working on going from outside to inside, and just get a flam using a lot of arm, okay? And turn on the metronome. It should sound something like this. Okay, so I'm using my arm, outside's in first, and then I'm coming into the inside. Now after you get that really solid and consistent every time with the metronome, then you want to kind of transition into doing a 1, a 2, a 3, and use a little bit more wrist rotation for that second note. Now for the outside, the inner mallet to the outer mallet, the same thing kind of applies. You want to get that flam motion first. And then practice doing arm wrist, and twisting it just a little bit more to get a 1, a 2. Okay, so after you get the basic concept down of getting the arm and then the wrist, and you've used your metronome and you've got it really, really consistent and really even from mallet to mallet, the next thing you need to do is build your fluidity and your speed. As I said before, this is kind of a circular motion. So to kind of train yourself to move your arm and your wrist in that circle, you want to practice these things in some kind of triplet pattern. For example, you can do a stroke with your left and then a lateral with your right to get a triplet. And that would look something like this. So using those triplet motions will definitely help you out. It'll help build the speed and fluidity you need to start putting these things with both hands together. Okay, you may find when you go to put both hands together that you'll have certain mallets that pop out and some that are louder than others and some that aren't as loud as they should be. I don't know if I can demonstrate that because I spent so much time trying to make them even, but let me try to do it poorly for you. So that wasn't so good. So this mallet up here was really strong, but the ones in the middle were just a little bit weak, and it didn't have a nice even flow to it. So a method that we use to get the strokes more even is to practice accenting one note at a time. Kind of like a grid for you drumline folks out there. So you just do a grid of accenting one mallet at a time, and then accent both on the right and both on the left, and then accent everything. It's just like your standard flam grid, but you're doing it with this pattern, and it looks something like this. And after you start mastering that and your strokes get really, really even, you're going to need to experiment with shrinking down the intervals, because as you get smaller and smaller, it requires more and more torque from your hands. And as you get to larger intervals, the octaves, it's actually really, really easy to do this with octaves because your wrist isn't moving that much. You can crank these things out super fast with octaves. So that's not a big deal, but the smaller intervals become quite a bit of a challenge. And using the accents will really help you out, especially when you get down to like the interval of a second. It gets really, really challenging. Here's an example. So that gets really, really challenging. But in today's literature, those things are all over the place at really, really tiny intervals. Or if you're Kevin Bobo, you'll just do it on one note with all four mallets, and I can't demonstrate that because I can't do it. But he does this double lateral roll like this fast on one note. It's pretty cool. I just can't do it. All right, as you start getting more advanced in these things, there's a couple ways that you can grow after you get the basic concept down. I mean, changing intervals will satisfy you for a really long time, but once you get that down, one of my favorite ways to warm up is to do your scales, but do them with all lateral strokes. So you have to kind of find some weird stickings to make it happen, but it's really fun and really challenging. I'll just play a few scales for you so you can see what that looks like, but you really have to play with the sticking. So if you don't like my sticking, that's great, find your own, but that will look something like this. Now some of these scales are really, really fun to do like that, particularly scales in which one hand stays on the upper manual and one hand stays on the lower one. manual register, whatever. Anyway, so like E flat, E major, A flat, A major, they become your favorite scales to play because you can burn them pretty fast. Check it out. Another fun way to practice this one is, since laterals are kind of like diddles, you can erase a snare player. So if they're doing an exercise like higga-digga-burr or chicken in a roll, or lots of people call it different things, but you can do the same thing by doing intermouths for the singles and then laterals for the doubles, and it gets really, really, really crazy. When you get really good at those things and you want to go to the even next level past that, and that's kind of about where I am, you start getting into a lot of the Kevin Bobo stuff. So if you purchase his book, I think it's called, what's it called? It's something about advanced techniques for the advanced marimbaist. Oh man, should have looked that up beforehand. I'll post a picture of it right here so you can see. But basically it talks about how he overlapped all of these lateral strokes to achieve these really cool rhythms and textures. For example, if you take your left hand and you do an outside to inside lateral, and you take your right hand and you do an inside outside lateral, and you mix those two together, you get this. And when you take that pretty fast, it sounds really cool. Now he does them with like triples, and he mixes like triples with doubles and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I haven't really worked on that, so I'm not going to try to demonstrate it. But if you look at a lot of his music, particularly from 2 CDs ago of his, you just see like a whole bunch of crazy overlapping strokes, and they make this really, really neat textures. Alright guys, I hope this video has been helpful to you. I know I haven't given you like a lot of like exercises, but that's because most people when they practice these, they just go down the scale or do intervals, inside, outside intervals, spreading them around, that sort of thing. So I don't really want to notate that out because you'd spend more time reading the notation than if I just showed you. So as a bonus, before we leave, I'll show you a couple exercises that are my favorite, or at least that I work on a lot. And one is when I first started learning these things, I would just go through that grid, but do all the intervals from a fifth down to a second, and then back up, and that would look something like this. Okay, another exercise that's really fun, I got from a really, really great teacher and player named Rob Sandrell, who's currently teaching at Radford University. Great guy, excellent teacher. Highly recommend you check him out. Just go down for a lesson or something. I mean, he's fantastic. Anyway, so an exercise that he does to do these things is let's see, how do I explain this? Okay, so they're like a series of triplets, and in one hand, you'll just do an alternating stroke, and in the other hand, you'll do a lateral combination, and then you'll switch. So slowly it will look like this. faster, it starts sounding really, really groovy. If you're still looking for more exercises, you can check out all the standard resources, Stephen's book, Give Howard's book. They all have, little exercises if you don't want to make your own. Most people just kind of make their own though. Work around a chord progression or around a scale or just work with some intervals. Because you don't want to try to do too much too quick. You really want to focus on getting that circular, smooth motion and getting the mouths as even as humanly possible. Alright guys, I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you have any questions, please send me an email at marinbiology@gmail.com and just keep sending them and I'll keep answering them. You guys are great. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you next time.